you very much. Thank you. Every year I come here in December. I've come here 5 or 6 years, and every single year I have the same thought, which is I feel like I'm in the set of Stonehenge in Spinal Tap. It's like, I love it. I feel like Ozzy Osbourne walking out here. Thank you so much for having me. I just want to start by saying, and I mean this sincerely, this is not shilling, this is honest. I think Charlie Kirk did an amazing thing in this election. And people make the obvious point that the two-party system is fading and that the parties themselves are weaker, more disorganized, and inevitably more corrupt than they've ever been. But they're being replaced, and Charlie Kirk is more powerful in the true sense, which is he actually gets things done, than the Republican National Committee. And I just think that's amazing. For a man who, if there's ever been a debate, like, is it worth going to college? Look at Charlie Kirk, an amazing person, and I'm proud to have him as a friend. Anyway, thank you very much for having me. I was thinking, flying out here today, this really is a moment of liberation for the country. I think the vibe has changed. That's real. And I feel it everywhere I go. I haven't met a hostile person in the last 6 weeks anywhere in the United States. People seem happier. And I've been trying to think about, what actually changed. Obviously, Trump won. Kamala Harris lost. Which is great. But what really happened was the spell was shattered. And here's what the spell was. And I think all of us, to one degree or another, were under its influence for at least the past 8 years, but probably the past 30 years. The spell was this. Now, a spell is an incantation. It's a phrase or idea that, if repeated enough, gains power. And the way you break a spell is by saying boo really loudly and waking up everyone to the truth that the spell is fake. And it had been 30 years since anyone did that. And here's what the spell was. The spell was that the tiny group of people who run the country to their own benefit represented, the rest of the world. That everybody agreed with all the dumb pieties they were screaming at you, that all the good people were on the other side, and that you were somehow alone, trapped in your house thinking freaky far-right things that you should be embarrassed of. And all the truly decent, moral, progressive, open-minded people were on the other side, laughing at you. And that you were some kind of medieval freak, probably dangerous. And what the election showed was the opposite was true. The fact that Trump won not just the majority of the popular vote, but huge segments of unrelated parts of the society told the entire story. Trump won young people, Hispanics. He won Muslims in Southeast Michigan. He won Orthodox Jews in upstate New York. He basically won everybody except for the tiny core of super unhappy people who controlled everything. And I remember thinking about 10 years ago, having grown up in an affluent neighborhood in California and lived in a bunch of other affluent neighborhoods my whole life, that the politics of the Democratic Party reminded me very much of my neighbor's, my buddy's, divorced mom in 1978 in La Jolla, California. And I'll never forget sitting in his backyard with his mom, who had become an artist after getting divorced, an artist. And she was sitting there wearing sandals. She had long frizzy hair, and she was smoking a Moor, which was the cigarette of choice for divorced ladies in the 70s. It was really long and thin and brown. And it was a sign of liberation, personal liberation. I don't need a man anymore. I'm on my own. I am woman, hear me roar. I am feminist. I am the future. And I remember sitting in the backyard of their $4 million house by the pool as she ranted about the patriarchy and capitalism, smoking her Moor. And I remember thinking, she's obviously crazy, but this is the unhappiest person I've ever met. I kind of can't wait to get out of here, take off with my buddy and go play. This woman is miserable, and that informs all of her views. So that was, 1978, 79. I wake up in 2015, and that's the entire Democratic Party sound like my friends angry feminist mom, like pissed at her husband, who she hates, but you can kind of understand why, but he's still paying for the house with the pool. And I'm like, those politics, that very specific politics of affluent, unhappy people who have everything but really nothing inside at all, who've reached like the terminus, the end stage of consumer society, where you can't distract yourself or medicate yourself enough to avoid like the basic tragedy of your life, which is it has no meaning. And rather than solve that by believing in something with inherent value like God, you externalize all your disappointment and hate onto everybody else. Your life has been a total failure. You have no skills. Your kids hate you, but you still have the moral high ground because you've occupied it early and defended it ruthlessly. So people who had everything to be ashamed of diverted attention from their own failures by screaming at you about your moral inferiority, and you bought it. And I bought it, and all of us kind of bought it. It was like, you can't say this stuff out loud because it's embarrassing, and like polite people don't say those things out loud, like obvious things. Like, you're idiotic. And no, boys can't become girls. And no, you don't get to run our foreign policy or energy policy. You can't even change the tire on your Volvo. You're useless and dumb. And a compassionate society would not let you starve to death, but you're not allowed to run everything. Nobody ever said that because they occupied this place of moral authority. And they had like kind of the predictable institutions to enforce their rule, the cultural institutions, especially the universities. And if I could just, I want to say one more time, Charlie Kirk has done more personally to break that spell by succeeding without a college degree than anybody I've ever met. Rather than whining about college indoctrination and how it's, a waste of money and time, he just goes out without a college degree and just becomes a crazy success through hard work and intelligence and makes the point himself by his own life, which is, by the way, how you convince people, not by yelling at them or even trying to persuade them, but by living in a way that proves your point. If you're onto something, if you're on the right path, your life should reflect it. You should be joyful. You should have meaningful, deep relationships with the people around you. You should have the respect of the people who work for you. You should have the love of your spouse, et cetera, et cetera. If you are telling me that college is a bad idea, show me a better way, and he has. These are very obvious observations, but for some reason, for like 30 years, we ignored them, and we allowed people who not only have no moral authority, who should feel deep shame and be engaged in a long process of deep reflection that includes ashes and sackcloth. Really, living in some, faraway place in the desert, repenting full time for, say, the Iraq War. They should not be on television giving instructions for how we proceed at all. But we all kind of sat there and are like, well, we kind of have to take it. And my kids can't get jobs because in a country with a Civil Rights Act, they're the wrong color, but we kind of have to take it. And, my children aren't going to own anything, they're going to rent, but that's just the way it is in a free market system. We kind of have to take it. And by the way, the people who are doing all of this are, we will acknowledge, in some sense, better than we are. We call them the elites. They did go to Princeton. You went to Penn State. And we all kind of played along with it. Go Penn State, by the way. That's exactly right. You have nothing to be ashamed of, Mr. Penn State. But the point is, the Trump election showed that what they claimed was a far-right, boutique, crazed, dangerous ideology that actually was a threat sufficient that the Department of Homeland Security and the U.S. military ought to be keeping an eye on you, and they ought to have a right to spy on you, that supposedly crazed fringe ideology was in fact shared by pretty much everybody other than my buddy's divorced mom and other unhappy people. And what do we learn from that? We learned that the whole thing was an illusion. And the biggest illusion of all was the race stuff. That was the biggest illusion of all. And they could no longer say that people who don't want to go along with their program are racists because look at the election results. Look at the election results. Now, no one should be surprised by that. By the way, if you don't live in Bethesda, if you're out in the world, you know that, like, normal people don't want crime and homelessness and drugs and open borders. It doesn't matter what they look like or where they're from. Nobody wants that. No normal person wants that. I remember when I lived in Washington, an actual conversation I had at an actual dinner party that if you put it on film in the middle of a movie, people would be like, that's just not believable, that never happened, but it actually happened. I was in the middle of getting lectured in a very polite way by one of my neighbors who was a very nice person, but obviously a lot better than me because she was a Hillary Clinton voter. And she said, but she was fundamentally a nice person, but totally convinced of her moral authority. And she said to me, you know, I have a lot of problems with your views on immigration. Frankly, I don't think you're a racist. I just want to be clear. She's my neighbor. I don't think you're a racist. But basically, she said, you're a racist. Okay, so I was trying to, like, defend. Well, actually, I think countries need borders. I'm trying to be polite. 15 minutes later, she goes, my housekeeper loves you. Would you sign something for her? I was like, your housekeeper from Belgium? No, from El Salvador. Oh, right. So I'm such a nice person. I was, like, trying to be a Christian. I didn't say, so you think I'm a racist, but your Salvadoran housekeeper's, like, fully on board with my racist program? Tell me how that works. And then you realize it's not just her Salvadoran housekeeper, it's every Salvadoran housekeeper, actually, in the world. There's not a liberal one. Not one. There's literally, if you can find a liberal Salvadoran housekeeper, call me. I don't believe you. There's not liberal. You know, whatever you think, they're just not liberal. And a lot of America is not liberal in the way that they envision it. They're just not. They think if you break the law, you should be punished. They don't think it's cool to have somebody ODing on fentanyl right outside your house. By the way, they'd like to own things. They don't think that, like, the, Uber economy is the real economy. They'd like to have a little house somewhere and own a car. They think credit card debt is bad, and they're upset about it, and they talk about it. Because they're right on all counts. So these election results, if you look at them, and I would recommend everyone do so, not just because you love Trump, but because the long era of darkness is over, actually. It's over. We'll have political debates going forward. You've got your ideas, I've got my ideas, we can debate them. But I honestly don't think ever again in my lifetime will the richest people in the country be able to point a finger in your face and say, your position is too immoral to discuss, and if you keep talking, we're going to put you in jail. That has been their position. And they will never again get away with that. Ever. And if they think that boys can become girls and should compete on the swim team, that's fine. They're going to have to explain exactly how that works. And if they think that Ukraine's borders are more important than our borders, that's fine, but they're going to have to explain why. And if they think that it's okay for, like, 3 companies owned by their donors to buy up all the residential housing in the country and rent it back to you at a higher rate, they're going to have to tell you why that's a good idea. They can never again just do exactly what they want by waving away your concerns with an epithet. Shut up, racist won't work anymore. There are no permanent victories in this life. It doesn't mean that people who voted for Trump are going to get exactly what they want forever. You'd have to be a politician to make that promise, which I am not. That's a lie. But the era of no debate, shut up and obey, surf is over. It is over. So it is a lot harder if you run things to reason with people, to treat your population as citizens rather than slaves. It's a hassle. And someone like Kamala Harris, well, she wasn't capable of explaining what she thought or why. She wasn't capable of making an argument. By the way, I'm not attacking her. I always felt sorry for her. I did. I mean it. I never attack I'd make fun of Kamala Harris, in a kind of gentle, compassionate way, but she was a bystander to her own life. She never made a meaningful decision. She wasn't at fault for anything. She had no clue what was going on. She was just white-knuckling it through the day. The second the Xanax started to wear off, she'd be like, I gotta get out of here. She was chosen from like a sort of national contest, like the way they used to choose, you know, like the kids on the baby food boxes or whatever. We need someone who looks like this, will say the following things. Oh, there she is. Let's make her Attorney General of California and then Vice President. It's like that's how it happened. She never had a role in it at all. So I'm not going to attack her. But the people who chose her and put her up to it, and her senile boss, who, by the way, was senile when he became president in 2020, the people who pulled that caper off and kept it from everybody for 4 years, those people are mad because they don't want to explain why they're doing what they're doing because they can't justify it. It's unjustifiable. There is, I have this problem for many years as someone whose job it was to ask people to explain themselves. They just wouldn't come. They would not come. It's like, we're not talking to you, racist. Okay. And I would always say, whatever. I would always say, just to rattle them, I said this 3 different times to the New York Times. They never printed it. I thought it was the funniest thing ever. They'd be like, you're racist. They'd be like, actually, I'm not. And if I was, I would say so. Actually, I'm a sexist. Which I thought was hilarious. I thought that was like the funniest line ever. It was on the record. They not one time printed it. And I always thought, if I was interviewing someone who's like, no, I'm actually a sexist, I'd be like, wow, that's a headline. They never ran that. Because they didn't care. They didn't care if I was a racist or a sexist or a Martian or a transcendental meditation enthusiast. It didn't matter. None of it mattered. The point was, shut up. Shut up. And if you don't shut up, it drives them completely bonkers because they have no plan B. If you don't shut up, they have to explain themselves and justify, like, was Hunter Biden like a energy expert? How much did he know about natural gas? Like, what was that? And Joe Biden, how did you get a credit card company to pay for your house? Shut up, racist! There are just a lot of unanswerable questions. Why do we have biolabs in Ukraine? That's kind of weird, right? Of all the nations of the world, if you're looking for people to run biolabs and do gene editing, would you pick Ukraine, the poorest and most corrupt country in Europe? I don't think so. You'd probably go to Geneva, wouldn't you? Or Liechtenstein? I think I would. You go to Ukraine? What is that? Shut up, racist! I still don't know the answer, though I have some guesses. But the point is, it's a massive threat when the population decides not to shut up and just politely insist on answers. And so at that point, you're stuck with very few options because you can't answer the question. And anyone who's been a teenager knows the feeling of being cross-examined by, a grouchy parent. Like, what is the answer? The whole front of the car is stoved in, like, how'd that happen? You don't really have an answer, right? So what are they going to do about it? Well, they have about a month. And I don't want to make anybody paranoid, but I don't think you can overstate how profound this is. It's not even about Donald Trump. Oh, it is about Donald Trump, of course, and his policies and the people he's going to appoint, but it's bigger than that. It's about a population that feels free to demand answers from people who've effectively been oppressing them for decades. And they're afraid. Now, by the way, I think certain people should be afraid. I think Tony Fauci should be afraid, actually. You fund the creation of the COVID virus. You know you're doing it. You're committing Frankenstein research with American tax dollars in a Chinese military biolab. You know that COVID is out. It escaped from the lab in August of 2019. Within a short period, you know this. You don't tell anybody about it. You're responsible for the creation of this virus. You know that with the Chinese military. And somehow you get to boss the country around. You get to exert more power than any single citizen in the history of the United States. And then at the end of that, once you've been exposed as a criminal, you get Secret Service protection at taxpayer expense and a sinecure at Georgetown because you're a hero and anyone who asks questions is a danger to you. We need to correct some misconceptions there, okay? But in general, I would say Trump voters, like Trump himself, are really forgiving people. They don't seek revenge. They seek some measure of justice because the human heart longs for justice, but they don't seek to grind their enemies under their feet. That's what the left does. Most of these people are Christians anyway. They believe in forgiveness. So I actually don't think Kamala Harris faces a prison term. And I don't want Kamala Harris to go to prison. I would like Kamala Harris to get a legitimate job for the first time in her life. Unlikely, has no skills. Whatever. I have a lot of hopes. But it doesn't matter. The people who've been running things are absolutely paranoid and afraid. And it's not just Democrats, by the way. It's Mitch McConnell in the Senate. It's a number of Republican senators who have collaborated with the regime for years, many, many years, and they are really afraid. And the main thing they're afraid of is disclosure. The system operates on secrecy. And again, anyone who has been a teenager, or anyone who is male, I'll just say that, understands that secrecy is 100% a marker for sin. As distinct from privacy, by the way, we have, doors on bedrooms and bathrooms. Privacy is great. We have no privacy. They have secrecy. So secrecy allows people to do things which, if known, they could not do. Evil thrives in darkness. We know this. And so the whole system is set up to keep you from knowing what they're doing. And they use classification laws in order to do that. And they fear that if Donald Trump's appointments go through and Donald Trump's people get in charge of the government and get control of the levers, that they will reveal to the country what has been happening, well, to be precise about it, for about 61 years since, whatever, or 63 years, I guess. Well, exactly. And then subsequent to that, what exactly has been going on? And so, by the way, I just want to pause and say, you will know that reform is coming, that corruption is in retreat. You will know that things have a chance of getting better when Tulsi Gabbard is confirmed as Director of National Intelligence. And why will you know that? Why is that a critical appointment? It's not just because you like Tulsi Gabbard, agree with her. Even if you dislike Tulsi Gabbard and disagree with Tulsi Gabbard, don't like her. She is the critical appointment because she has the ability to declassify the truth about what your government has been doing in your name with your money for decades. No one doubts that Tulsi Gabbard's a patriotic person. She's an Army officer. She served in the U.S. military for 20 years. So, by the way, if she was a foreign agent, how exactly is she carrying a gun in the U.S. military? It's absurd. You will know who's on which side by the reaction of Tulsi Gabbard. If there are Republican senators who are voting against Tulsi Gabbard's confirmation, then you, either in the Intel Committee or in the Open Senate, you will know that person is not only my enemy as someone who voted for change, for openness, for transparency, for an end to corruption, for a draining of the swamp. You know that person is an enemy of the United States. Period. It's really that simple. And you will get the same story. Oh, it's national security. We can't let our enemies know. We can't trust Tulsi Gabbard. No, we can't trust you, actually. This is going to take place in the open, assuming we get that far. So this is just the one point I want to make about the next 30 days. There will be attempts to prevent this from happening. I don't want to make anyone feel paranoid. But at this point, once you win the Electoral College and the majority of the popular vote, that is an undeniable mandate, so there's no way to argue that Trump shouldn't be seated or anything like that. No one is contesting this election. No one can. You're going to need an event that is effectively catastrophic to change the course from openness to more secrecy, and there's no faster way to do that than a war. And by the way, the kind of war that the Biden administration is advocating for right now with the world's largest nuclear armed power could eliminate the United States and the entire Western Hemisphere. That's not an overstatement. But you will see people you think are your allies all of a sudden telling you when the United States so badly needs attention, someone in charge of the United States has to look at the country and say, you're in trouble. The numbers show it clearly. This country needs the attention of its leaders. It needs the care of its leaders. It needs people who actually want to improve the country, not the world, the country. And if some of those people look you right in the face and say, I'm sorry, we're just going to have to deploy to this, that, or the other country because there's an imminent threat to the world, you know those people are trying to thwart the progress that you voted for. Those people are your enemies. I'm sorry to say that. It's just true. And I don't care what I lived there all these years. And I watched it no, we have to do this. We have to do this. And this person is now our enemy. And I went along with it every single time. I was like, well, that guy sounds bad. And by the way, they almost always were bad. You know what I mean? Like, most leaders are pretty bad. Everyone's a kind of variety of Idi Amin, though most are less entertaining than he was. But you know what I mean? Like, this leader's bad. Well, I believe that. That's why I don't live there. I'm from here. I was born here. This leader's bad. Yeah, great, got it. So we need to all of a sudden take our entire budget, all of our energy, all of our attention, and focus on killing this leader. Well, it's like, you know, I'm not going to weep for that leader, but like, what about me? What about my country? What about my children? Well, that can wait. Well, actually, it can no longer wait. And I think we need to say that really, really clearly. And the next time Dan Crenshaw stands up and says, but you don't understand the threat. Shut up, Dan Crenshaw. And everyone liked Dan Crenshaw. Just about had it with you. You got hundreds of thousands of American citizens dying of drug ODs, and you've done nothing. Your state was invaded by foreign nations at the behest of international organizations, including the United Nations. 15 million young men just came into our country for reasons we can't even understand, and you did nothing over your border. And you're going to tell me that some other nation is the threat? No, you're the threat. And that's true. So I don't care what party that person comes from. That person is an enemy of everything that you voted for. Trust me. We've seen this movie so many times, and the way that they short-circuit your critical thinking and get you to go along with it, and I know because I've been a victim of this, is by scaring the crap out of you with something. And the second you're afraid, you're like, oh, I guess an experimental vax, okay, I'll take it. Oh, I can't go outside anymore? All right. I'm worried about my grandchildren. Oh, we need to kill Saddam Hussein. He's bad. No! No mas! No mas! Fix this country. You are the father who abandoned his children, and there's no excuse for that. You, Dan Crenshaw, you entire Democratic Party, you Mitch freaking McConnell, you're the one whose own children languished and died while you focused on the neighbor's kids or kids in another country. All of that may be fine, but your duty is to your kids. That's why you're the leader. And anyone who shirks that duty is guilty of abandonment, and there is no lower man than the man who abandons his family. There is no lower form of leader than the leader who doesn't care about the people in his charge. And so make that the litmus test, I would say. I mean it, and I don't care what they say. They'll get up there and be like, well, I'm against trans swimmers too. Well, really? Who isn't? You'd have to be a freak to be for that. If that's the price of entry, we're not charging enough. You're against trans swimmers? Okay. Then you're not like brain damaged or something. Like, what? Of course you're against trans swimmers. Swimming with girls. I mean, obviously. Demand more. What are your priorities? And if they tell you some faraway place where people speak a language you don't understand, in a conflict that you can't possibly comprehend because it's in another country, that's priority one, you're done. You're done, Mike Pence, and all the rest of those people. But they're relentless. I mean, they are relentless. I mean, it is basically everybody. And I just want to, I don't know if Don was just up here before me. I was, of course, chatting like a magpie backstage, so I didn't hear it. But he is really my personal view is smartest guy in that whole orbit and really feels it. You know, didn't learn his politics from a book or from Twitter, but actually feels it. And he always says, when you deal with politicians, it's the politics of pain. They don't understand anything else. It's not how you deal with normal people. And if you're a decent human being, you don't get people to respond to you by threatening them, because that's sick. You don't beat your dog. You don't threaten to, smack your kids until they obey you. That's grotesque. You can convince people with love and by example. Unfortunately, that's not how you deal with politicians. They just don't respond that way. They're a different kind of organism. You really have to tell them, I'm sorry, get with the program or you can't get elected again. Because that's the only thing you care about. Because you're weird. And that has to be a baseline demand. Dan Crenshaw cannot be a congressman again. You just can't. It's just too insulting. Oh. Anyway, I'm going to just stop because I could go on my rants, but I want to take a couple questions. Well, I love you too. I can't even see you. I'm going to take a quick out break and take your questions. Yes, sir.
Do you know your questions?
Can I sign? I'm not qualified to sign your hats. I'm left-handed and dyslexic. Okay, hold on. This man right here.
You're going to do great.
The question is Ben Shapiro or Candace Owens? I'm only friends with one, but I'll say I want to support people when they're right and not when they're wrong. And why do you ask questions like that? You're a smart one. I'll tell you, I'll just be clear on this. I really think the fastest way to destroy the United States, I think the reason that we're trillions of dollars in debt, I think the reason that our social cohesion is frayed, I think the reason we open the borders, I think it's all connected, and it all stems from the core sin, which was believing that it was our job or duty to reorganize the world along our lines and control Iraq or huge swaths of the world. We're not good at that, and we didn't succeed in doing it, and we never repented for it. I think the cost of foreign wars is deeper than just the deaths and the agony that they caused. I think the whole society has felt it, and I think that there are wars that you have to fight. Those do happen. That's real. I'm not against all wars. Some wars are necessary. You get invaded, you have to fight back. A home invasion requires you to pick up your gun and say, get out. And if you won't, you shoot him. I mean, I'm not Gandhi, okay? But a war of choice for the profit of a few and to satisfy the completely ridiculous theories of AEI and all these other absurd think tanks in Washington, those are really immoral. And anyone who's for that going forward is immoral. I think that. Convince me otherwise. Yes, sir. So legacy media is obviously collapsing, and I just think we should take a moment of silence, really, to reflect inwardly at the joy. Like, there are moments, a child is born for the first time, your first kiss, asking the woman you love to marry you, MSNBC and CNN dying, like, they're all kind of connected. So we should, before we move on to, like, what's next, we should just appreciate how great that is. And they're not dying, they committed suicide through lying, which is, by the way, suicidal. If you're in the trust business and you can't stop lying, you've killed yourself. But what comes next? Well, I think what we have. I think that X is an amazing thing, There are probably downsides, but I think the massive upside is it's basically uncensored. I think podcasts are amazing. I can't even believe it's happening. I worked in television where we thought no one would pay attention for more than 4.5 minutes, and then we had to go sell prostate cures or gold scams, and it turns out people wanted like 3 hours. What? There's no greater compliment you can pay a nation, a citizenry, that they want information and understanding so badly they will listen for 3 hours. That's incredible. It makes me feel great about America, grateful to Joe Rogan for basically creating the genre. When everyone laughed at him, including me, I never said it to his face, but I was like, Joe Rogan, really? He thinks people are going to listen for 3 hours? Amazing. So I think we're in a great place, and I think that we should, instead of thinking of new forms of media, we should defend the ones we have, which are all based on free speech. And you're going to hear people say, in the coming months and years, we can't have speech this free because it's a danger. It offends people, it causes violence. That's a lie. Violence and speech are not the same. I can offend you, that's different from shooting you. Do not accept any attempt to take away your birthright, something that God gave you, and a government's job is to protect, which is your absolute right to say what you think is true, period. And that is worth defending above all things. And there are going to be people you think you're allies. The deception is profound. It's profound. We were promised profound deception, and we're getting it. It's not simple deception. It's not, oh yeah, drink Bud Light because some dude dressed as a schoolgirl. That's the obvious deception. He's not a schoolgirl, he's a dude. That's not really deception. That's like make-believe. It's a joke. Deep deception is an actual threat, and it plays upon your best qualities, your compassion. That's what happened during COVID. Good people obey. Do you love your grandparents? Then you'll obey. Well, of course, all good people love their grandparents. They respect the elderly. So they preyed upon your best qualities. They leveraged your decency against you. That's deception. And you're going to see that with speech. You're going to see this is hate. And some of it may, in fact, be hateful. But it's still your birthright to express what you believe, even if other people don't like it. And if there's one thing you have to defend, it's that. Yes, sir. I think we have a microphone. Hey!
Hi, my name is Annabelle. I want to thank you for being a patriot. And my question is, how can I help?
Well, I think you are helping. You've brightened my day already. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Every time, maybe because I have a lot of children, but every time I see like a bright-eyed, cheerful child speaking directly, it lifts my spirits. It compensates for a lot of bad things that I see. So that's way more important than any speech given in the Senate, as far as I'm concerned. Thank you.
Awesome. Great job.
Thank you. These people have microphones. Yes, sir.
Switch off. So if we have time.
Oh, microphone. Sorry.
Oh, me? Sorry. Hi, Tucker. My name is Joshua, and I'm happy that I get to ask you a question at AmericaFest for the second time. I just wanted to ask your thoughts about conservatives running away from the issue of abortion and caving on the right to life. I fear that by avoiding this issue, it will result in the GOP eventually being a pro-choice party, which will result in the GOP becoming a less conservative party, since without the right to life, all other rights are meaningless. I just wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Well, there's this super interesting phenomenon that I've noticed in my own life, and it's described in some detail in the New Testament, which is the outcome is actually the opposite of what you expect. The meek inherit the earth. And just when you think you're losing, actually is the moment when you realize that you've kind of won. And the opposite is always true. When you think you've won, you're usually in for a surprise. And I think abortion is a perfect example of this. Yes, I've been very sincere on that issue, my whole life. And I noticed it, and I really care about it. I have a child who was born on January 22nd, which is the anniversary of Roe v. Wade. So it was like, I've thought about it a lot. And yeah, I've been really distressed by the cowardice of Republican politicians. And it's a class thing too. It's like, rich people don't want to talk about the social issues. Well, the social issues are the only issues that matter. Like what? Whether people live or die and how my family does, that's a social issue? That doesn't matter. Not as important as GDP and war. Oh, shut up. It's all that matters are the social issues, because socialization is the only thing that I care about as other people. Anyway, but they're very embarrassed of those, and those are considered like redneck issues or religious people issues. But the truth is, I think every single person in the country knows that abortion is, at best, a real tragedy, and at worst, what was clearly a form of human sacrifice. That's why they had an abortion van outside the Democratic convention. I don't really think anybody sincerely shouts their abortion with joy. I think everybody knows that the cascading effects of that, never leave, and it's like the true tragedy. Taking of life is always the greatest tragedy. And I actually think the time is right to just say that out loud. This is the opposite of liberation, speaking of deception. The main thing that most people want, there's surveys on this, but we don't need surveys, we know this, is children. I mean, that is the only real measure of wealth, is children. And anyone who's against children, making it harder for you to have them, making it easier for you not to have them, is the enemy of you and of humanity itself, is pro-death. And I just don't think in the end that wins. And I think everyone secretly knows it. And I think the hysteria and the extremism of the abortion people is testament to that. It's like when you know you're wrong, you get louder and more hysterical, right? And so I actually think it's become super obvious. They can't even, by the way, I felt like 30 years ago under Clinton, they had a pretty good formula for justifying abortion. They were like, well, it's safe, legal, and rare, and it's a tragedy when a 14-year-old gets raped. And I was like, well, that's for sure. It's a tragedy. And because it's so tragic, you need an abortion. Now they're like, no, you want to like do something good for America? Kill your kid. Well, that's just Mayan at that point. I mean, that's just, you know what I mean? That's Canaanite. That's just human sacrifice. And they're just saying it. So I do think it divides the country into people who sort of know that and it's obvious, and then people who embrace it. And, you know, it's sad, but they're probably not going to be on your side. So I actually think the recognition that human life is the most important thing is dawning on people, and that I'm not even Catholic, and I agree that war, euthanasia, abortion, killing people, it's just bad. And anyone who's enthusiastic about killing people is scary. And the last thing I'll say is the one thing I am worried about is euthanasia, which is the state murder of its citizens. And I think the economic incentives are really powerful for the state to want to do that. As healthcare costs rise, as depression rises, which I think is one of the byproducts of prescription drug use, SSRIs actually have not lowered the suicide rate, they've increased it, et cetera, et cetera. That's all getting very obvious, and it's super expensive, and how do you pay for it? Well, Canada's just like, we'll just kill you. Make it very hard to get your knee replaced, make it very easy to die. And I'm very concerned that's coming here. And you don't have to be Catholic or even Christian to see that as totally evil. And I hope, and I will demand, to the extent I have any control, that the Republican Party says no to that immediately. People are not objects. They're not animals. You can't slaughter them. They have souls. And just because you're expensive and inconvenient doesn't make you human. We reject slavery because we embrace the humanity of every person. That's why we're against slavery, because we recognize that people are human beings with souls created by God. And anyone who says you can just kill them when they get in the way, whether it's in Ukraine or an abortion clinic or in a euthanasia lab, is evil. And I don't care if they claim that it's liberation. It's not. It's the darkest thing. It's murder. So, whatever. But I fully expect the people who told you that you had to relinquish the Bill of Rights in favor of protecting old people will be the very first to say we need to kill all the old people because they're too expensive. Yes, sir.
This will be the last question of the night.
Oh, man, I'm just getting rolling now.
I hope you'll like my question. So, hi, Tucker. My name's Jake. I just want to say I named my dog after you. So, thanks for that.
You know what? I take that as a dog man. I take that as a high compliment. So, thank you.
I love your laugh too. So, my question is about nicotine.
Yeah.
So, I see your little packet. I don't know if that's Zyn or Alp, but from what I hear, nicotine comes with a bunch of benefits, increasing testosterone. Love that. So it's my 16th birthday today, and they say you should be 21, 18, 25. When did you start taking nicotine, and when would you recommend taking nicotine?
Who comes up with these questions? You're trying to get me in trouble. So let me just be clear. There are laws about this, whether or not I think they're insane, that you can go fight and die in Iran, but can't have a nicotine pouch at 18. In fact, they'd like you to go fight and die in Iran, but you can't have a nicotine pouch. I think we've got misplaced priorities. But there are laws about making health claims you can make health claims about anything. They tell you weed is good for you. They tell you to take, Adderall in 5th grade. Go ahead and take SSRIs. You need some benzodiazepines because those are good, not addictive or anything. But nicotine is somehow a threat. And I suspect that any compound that makes the population passive and willing to accept mistreatment is favored, and any compound that heightens awareness, like black coffee, which they're always telling you is bad, and I can tell you as a 55-year-old who's had approximately a gallon of it every day for 41 years, it's not, is disfavored. So I can only tell you it works for me. I'm not going to tell you how old I was when I started using related products, but I'm 55 and I've been using it for 41 years. And I'm not endorsing that at all. I'm just telling you what worked for me. I don't drink or use drugs of any kind, including Advil, and I haven't for 22 years. I've got pretty bad eating habits, which is obvious. I love pizza, but I don't put any chemicals in my body whatsoever other than nicotine and black coffee, and I feel great. I do. I feel, and by the way, I just want to say again, this is not licensed health advice. I don't run the CDC, okay? I'm not in charge of the Department of Agriculture's food pyramid, so I'm not going to tell you to eat 11 loaves of bread to lose weight. Because I'm not a certified scientist or a genius like the people who told you that masks would keep you from catching COVID. And by the way, get 9 boosters. So I don't have the moral authority to give you advice about how to be healthy. I can only tell you what's worked for me, a man with a checkered academic record. But I can say, I feel good. I'll take one more question. Sorry.
Thank you, Tucker. A follow-up question for my 22 question to you. Unfortunately, here in State 48, the psychopathic overlords in our establishment class continue to steal our voices and our votes. It happened in California. It happened in 4 different Senate races. As ground forces on the field, we fight every day, mostly against the gelded, old, pathetic GOP.
Yes.
But what would you suggest we, the people, do to reestablish our rights to choose our servants? Thank you, sir.
I mean, I think there are a couple things. The first thing you can do is make it known that non-citizens cannot be counted in the census to apportion congressional seats. That is totally, well, it's unconstitutional, but more to the point, it defeats the basic premise of democracy, which is that citizens run their own country. It's self-government, right? That's the point of a republic. We hire people to run it for us, but we run it because it belongs to us because we're from here, we're citizens. If you allow foreigners, non-citizens, legal or illegal, to pick your representation, then foreign countries run your country, and that's called colonialism, over which we fought a revolutionary war. So that cannot be allowed, okay? So that's the first thing you can do. The second thing you can do is point out that a sanctuary city or state is a form of insurrection much more profound than anything South Carolina attempted in 1861 at Fort Sumter. You are saying that you are not following the most basic of all federal laws, which is the federal government, not state governments, the federal government gets to decide who comes into the country. And you're saying, I'm opting out. That's insurrection, actual insurrection, not fake insurrection like January 6th 4 years ago, but actual insurrection. And there is a long precedent for dealing with this. It happened in 1956 in Little Rock when Central High School decided we're going to ignore Brown versus Board of Education, and the Republican President of the United States, Dwight D. Eisenhower, sent the 101st Airborne to Little Rock and said, no, you're going to obey federal law. Period. Because if you don't, it's insurrection. Because these are core questions. These are not minor sort of peripheral questions. These are questions of national sovereignty. So I have no idea why anybody in Washington, but especially Republicans in Washington, I mean, they're mesmerized by turning Iraq into Belgium and defending Ukraine. That's the actual answer. But why did they put up with this? They shouldn't, and we should demand that they don't put up with it. And the third thing you can do is primary the hell out of anyone who doesn't represent you. And no one does that. And what happens is they talk you into not doing it. Lindsey Graham does this every 6 years. So find some issue And he'll be like, I mean, he did it during the Kavanaugh hearings, and he did an amazing job. Lindsey Graham's one of the most charming people in Washington. If you wonder why people still listen to Lindsey Graham, it's because he's hilarious, and he's, like, fun to have dinner with. But the truth is, he's totally non-aligned with the Republican electorate. Like, his priorities have nothing in common with the priorities of Republican voters, including in South Carolina. But every 6 years, he'll pick a symbolic issue, and he'll be like, I stand with Judge Kavanaugh. And everyone's like, oh, you're such a hero. And then it's back. The second he's elected, it's like, no, it's, hey, shut up, Americans, about your stupid border and your invasion. Nobody cares. Shut up, racist. It's Ukraine. They all do that. And they did it. I mean, no one could be more offended by boys in girls' sports as the father of 3 daughters than I am. So I'm not like pro Dylan Mulvaney or whatever at all. But I also understand sleight of hand when I see it because I've seen gypsies do 3-card Monte and been the victim of it. It's so fast, you don't know what happened. Like, where's the peanut? Underneath the walnut shell. It was right there. They're too fast. I know what that looks like. They divert your attention. And they use that issue to divert your attention from what they were actually doing, which is ignoring your concerns in favor of the concerns of their donors and foreign countries and lobbies for those countries. That's just a fact. And they use the trans issue to do that. I hate to tell you this. And a lot of people in your conservative media did exactly the same thing. And they made you feel like they were on your side. But they weren't, because they don't really care about that issue. You do. That's why you think they're on your side. You cared about Judge Kavanaugh. So when Lindsey Graham's like, oh, yeah, I'm on your side, you're like, you know, I kind of like that guy, actually. That charming little midget from South Carolina. But trust me, you just got played. So the key is to figure out what's important to you and your family and your neighborhood, and start there. Like, one of the problems people have is they extrapolate outward too much. They live in a distant place. They live online. Look at your own family. Like, what do your kids need? They can't afford to go to college. They can't make enough in their job to buy a house at 32. They can't make enough to get married and produce grandchildren for you. That's a crisis. That's way more a crisis than anything Iran will ever do to this country. And so demand that your elected leaders who are using your money and have your authority and your military, that they do something about it. Your neighborhood looks nothing like it did 10 years ago because of illegal immigration. Well, we have a military on which we spend like $1.5 trillion a year. Why aren't they at the border protecting the country they serve? What is that? I don't understand. And anyone else who doesn't get that immediately is not qualified to represent you. And I actually think it rarely takes a primary. I think if enough people sit down with Congressman X, even someone like Dan Crenshaw or Lindsey Graham, yeah, boo. But I think if you actually sat down with Dan Crenshaw and said, listen, Dan, I get it. You're a little, but I'm kind of on to you now. And we want you to do the following 10 things. And if you don't, we're going to get someone who's aligned with us, and we're going to primary you. And at the very least, we're going to wreck your day. And he'll maybe be like, okay, your concerns are more important than the concerns of my donors. I will actually do what you want. Because in the end, it's not personal. You just want someone to listen to you and help you. That's the whole point of our system. Your representatives are there to help you. And if they're not, then you have to replace them. You have to be serious about it. And they will listen to you. If you are serious, they will listen. And by serious, I don't mean threatening them or jumping up and down. But just call Charlie Kirkman. There's no one better at that. Hey, Charlie Kirk, I'm calling, I'm a Turning Point Action donor, and I think we should primary so-and-so. Call Charlie Kirk. Probably, yeah, Lindsey Graham, someone should just do that. Not because, I kind of like Lindsey Graham personally, but it is such an insult to the idea of an opposition party. You have two parties. They should not agree with each other on the biggest questions. Because if they do, someone's getting left out of the equation, and that person is you. Someone needs to represent you on the big issues, the things that actually matter. Not just on swimmers at some state college, but on real issues. And anyway, just make them obey. I think that's up to us. Don't be charmed by them. Force them. Spank them like the bad little girls they are. Thank you.
We are proud to provide a venue for Oliver Stone's son, Sean, who's a friend of ours and also a filmmaker. His latest documentary series called All the President's Men. It's a multi-part series in which he explains in vivid detail how the first Trump administration, 2016 to 2020, was subverted from the very first day by the deep state, who picked off one by one members of the then president's inner circle. And some of them are still on the scene. You will see in-depth interviews with, for example, Kash Patel, who is the incoming president's new FBI director, with Mike Flynn and many other people you know whose whole stories you may not have heard before. It's an amazing series. All the President's Men by Sean Stone, playing right now on TuckerCarlson.com. We're proud to have it. We think you'll like it.